Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, we've been inspired by the Outer Worlds. So, Mike, why don't you tell us what we're tackling this week?
We are going to talk about, I almost said Positive Spin. That's my other podcast. What is happening right now? I'm losing my mind. Am I going to edit this out? Absolutely not. We are going over the history of Fallout 1 and 2. Now, you're probably wondering, hey, Mike, why stop there? Why not jump into 3 and New Vegas? That's definitely a thing. Those are history. Those are in time. But no, we're not going to, because those games are super important and near and dear to my heart, and I just don't have time to process it now and have them all in one. I feel like they need their own episode, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Because I feel like we could do that a combo, because Fallout 3 was big to me, and I know Fallout New Vegas was big to you.
Yeah,
right?
I played 3 and New Vegas, and I loved both of them. Didn't quite get into 4 as much, and I still haven't played Outer Worlds yet.
Oh, we're going to talk about that at the end. Yeah, so this whole thing is inspired because I am obsessed with the Outer Worlds right now, and I can't stop playing it because it's a narrative-driven game, and you don't always have to fight people, and it's just really interesting. Okay, so let's get to the topic at hand. And if we're going to talk about Fallout 1, we first need to talk about another game called Wasteland. Have you ever heard of Wasteland, Tyler?
You know, I've heard of Wasteland 2, which I understand was a sequel to a very beloved game called Wasteland. That's really all I know about it, though.
Yeah, so Wasteland, you got the parts you said were correct just now. Everything you said was correct.
Great.
There was a Wasteland 2,
I'm going to
and there was
stop
a game
here,
before called
and
Wasteland.
You can carry it the rest of the way.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, you're 1 for 1, 100%. You're batting 1,000. Good job.
Wow.
Wasteland.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome, is a science fiction open world role-playing game, and it's essentially developed, well, not role-playing games and tabletop, role-playing video game, and it's developed by Interplay, who will go on to make Fallout 1 and 2, spoilers, and published by Electronic Arts in 1988. The year
going back a ways.
I was born, yes. And the game is set in a futuristic post-apocalyptic America destroyed by a nuclear holocaust generations before. Does that sound at all familiar, Tyler?
Yes, that sounds like a couple of games that I really enjoyed playing about 10 years ago called Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas.
Man, Fallout 3 was 10 years ago. Wow.
Yes, more than.
Well, it's definitely history, so we can definitely do it on this podcast. Now, Wasteland takes a lot of influence from tabletop role-playing games, which is kind of why I got it confused in the last paragraph I wrote. In fact, 2 of Wasteland's designers, Ken St. Andre and Michael Stackpole, they created 2 of those tabletop role-playing games that were a big influence on Wasteland, and those games were called Tunnels and Trolls, and then the other one's called Mercenaries, Spies, and Private Eyes. So those 2 tabletop role-playing games were created by people that ended up creating Wasteland. And now the cool thing about Wasteland is it's a RPG where you build a party and you travel around the game world. But what makes it unique is your NPC party members will say no to you if you're doing something they don't agree with.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool. So it's actually like conflict with your NPCs. And it's not like, because, you know, I feel like there's so many games now where your party just does whatever you say. But this one is not the case. And this game came out in 1988. So it's crazy they were doing it back then. The game is also noted because it's super hard, unforgiving even. And the pros appearing in the combat screens, because it's all like text-based explaining the story. You know, it's 1988. There's pictures and you're doing stuff, but it's very much like almost like Baldur's Gate-y, if I had to, even though I think Baldur's Gate came after this game, if I recall, the computer game anyway. But it's really definitely like super gory. And I have some phrases. So here's one. The enemy is reduced to a thin red paste and explodes like a blood sausage. So it's very, 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 very gross.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very specific.
And the game was even given like an unofficial PG-13 sticker on packaging in the US. Like they just put that on there. So 'cause I don't think the ESRB was a thing in 88, no. But they just put that on there so people would know, hey, this is what you're buying. It's pretty
That's
gory.
good. They didn't have to do that. That's good that they did that.
Yeah, Wasteland was also one of the first games to feature a persistent world. So the things you did in the game world were there when you came back. So if you return to an area later in the game, you'd find it in the state you left it in, rather than it being reset. And it was common for games of the time to not do that. But because hard drives were like coming kind of up in there. This meant they could like do like this kind of cool stuff. Having more memory made it so they could remember your choices and everything. So another thing about Wasteland is they actually included a printed, as in on paper, collection of paragraphs that you would have to read at certain times while you played the game. And these paragraphs would have like encounters, conversations, they'd have clues, and they just kind of helped you with the whole game itself. But because programming space was at a premium at this time, it kind of helped them save on resources for the game's story. They could put it in this manual instead of having it in the game itself. So it kind of saved them some time. But in it, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but this also did some rudimentary copy protection for the game. Like if someone pirated the game, they wouldn't know what's going on because they wouldn't have this paper paragraphs.
Oh, that was definitely a thing that games did at that time, of like that was a sort of way to prevent people from copying games, or not to prevent them from copying them, but just prevent them from being able to play them if they didn't have the thing with the passcodes on it or something like that. I mean, you could also just sort of copy those things over, but it made it a lot more work.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. Also, it even said that the paragraphs to throw people off had an unrelated storyline about a mission to Mars that was meant to mislead people reading the game that didn't buy the game. And it also had a fake set of passwords to mess with people trying to cheat. Yeah, I love this. I love this so much. So this game, Wasteland, was pretty much the beginnings of what would become Fallout. And the reason this happened there was a couple reasons it happened. The first thing was Fallout was going to be a sequel to Wasteland. First thing first. That's what it was going to be. Then what happened was Interplay lost the rights to Wasteland. I don't know how this works. I couldn't figure out that much about it, how they lost the rights to the game they made initially. But it must have been by the publisher, and they were the developer. That's my only thought, okay? The other thing that made Fallout into what it is today is at the time when Fallout was getting started, they had the rights to Steve Jackson's GURPS system. If you don't know what GURPS is, GURPS, it's an acronym that stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System. And it's a lot like D&D for people that don't know what I'm talking about. Like you make dice rolls, skill checks, stuff like that, okay? But the whole point of GURPS is you can use it in any setting. It's actually like generic universal role-playing system. So people that wanted to make their own campaigns for tabletop role-playing games would use GURPS instead of D&D because it was kind of more open and it had rules for everything. You know what I mean?
That's really cool.
Yeah, and GURPS is still around today. I actually went to Half Price Books looking for some D&D 5e books, which I did not find because they fly off the shelves, but I did see a lot of GURPS books there. So
very interesting.
It's cool. Yeah, and it's kind of cool. So this is kind of where, because we saw it at this time where computer games and tabletop role-playing were kind of molding together. You know, we kind of saw the beginnings of what would end up being things that we know and love, like MMOs and stuff. This is the very, very early days. So Interplay thought, hey, we can use this new GURPS system and we can take it and make a new Wasteland game that's ours. Not anyone else's, but it's ours. We own it. You know? And so in the early stages of planning, though, the post-apocalypse, like, nuclear thing wasn't really the only setting they considered. Fallout was almost a time travel themed game with aliens and dinosaurs.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on that game. That game sounds amazing.
That sounds fun, yeah.
And the only reason that they thought of that was because there are GURPS role-playing game handbooks with like set stories in them that you can play as, and that was one of them as they're pulling from. Tim Kaine, who was the producer of the game, he designed so much of the original Fallout, almost all of it. He said this, quote, "They actually worked on the game designer who wrote the GURPS time travel manual and worked out a complete time travel adventure, but it was just too much artwork for them to get done in a reasonable amount of time." So they actually had the whole story planned. They just never made the game. So it's kind of crazy, right? Because we could have had a totally different game. There might not be a Fallout.
I would love that game. Maybe that game became the Outer Worlds.
That's right. You know, there's a lot of there were a lot of dinosaur games that get kind of scrapped. You know what I mean? I think there was a trailer for a dinosaur game. Again, this is me pulling from my brain on the fly, so it might be completely wrong. But there was like something that was going to be like an open world dinosaur game, not Ark, but another one. And it was more about you like living with the dinosaurs in the jungle. And I think that just got completely scrapped like 2 years ago. It's just gone. And I'm like, oh man, that was a bummer. It looked really cool. So, okay, now that I'm off my fun tangent, the game's working titles of Fallout, before it was Fallout, were GURPS Wasteland and Vault 13. GURPS Wasteland, and the other title was Vault 13, a GURPS post-nuclear adventure. But Fallout was actually suggested by one of the Interplay co-founders, Brian Fargo. And he's going to come up later in this, and he seems like a real swell guy for a guy that owns a video game company. You know, because we've seen some not-so-swell guys.
It's true, we have.
We've seen some real scummy dudes. Brian Fargo does not seem like that kind of dude. So, the dropping of GURPS happened with a lot of drama. Okay. IGN reported that the contract fell through with the GURPS licensor Steve Jackson Games because there were excessive amounts of violence and gore in the game, and he did not like that. That's the first thing that I heard about. But because that thing went out, it's actually kind of good because this is what gave us the special system.
The special system?
You know, special in Fallout, strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck.
Oh, yeah.
I just pulled that all off the top of my head.
Very
I feel
well
really
done.
good about that. That is all because GURPS fell through. If GURPS didn't fall through, we wouldn't have the special system that we all know and love that's been in every single Fallout game. So that's a big thing about it. What was a bummer, though, for Tim Kaine specifically, who made almost the entire engine and game mostly by himself with the GURPS system already put in, is he then had to completely rebuild everything with the special system. Yeah, maybe not everything, but he had to completely take GURPS out of it and put the special system in. So Kaine worked with fellow employees at Interplay in their spare time, starting in 1994. That's when development started. He built the engine alone in 6 months, given no money and no resources, only time. Okay. Later, Kaine assembled a team of about 30 people to work on the game for the next 3 years. Isn't that nuts? So 3 years with this game.
It's a long time.
Yeah, the game was nearly canceled at one point because Interplay got the licenses to the Forgotten Realms and Planescape Dungeons and Dragons franchises. You know, that would have definitely killed it. But Kaine was convinced, like, to Interplay, he's like, we need to keep working on this project. It could be something big. And later, after the success of Diablo, Kaine even, like, shut them down on making it a multiplayer game and real-time based. He's like, no, it's going to be turn-based. It's going to have this system. Like, he fought for it tooth and nail, which is good. I'm glad he did. Okay, because otherwise we wouldn't have the game. The game was purposely balanced so that the side quests are totally optional. Okay? And actually, it's still like this today. Completely optional side quests. You could progress the main story on your own. But if you didn't improve your skills by doing side quests and getting experience, you're going to be way too weak to finish the main story game. And I think that pretty much holds up, right? That holds up with all the Fallout games now.
I think so, yeah.
So to create the detailed, like, this talking heads in Fallout 1 and 2, when you talk to a person, a little screen comes up in their dialogue, and then their talking head is on the side. They actually use that with clay. Like, the artists made the heads out of clay, and they studied how they'd move, and they wanted them to be animated. And then the heads were digitized using a Faro Space Arm and Vertisketch with Lightwave 3D used for geometric corrections. I don't even know what all this means. And they actually made the texture maps in Photoshop. And that's how they made the game, to have those talking heads. Isn't that neat? You can't see right now, but I am miming moving a talking head out of clay. It's like I'm in the movie Ghost. You know, it's like the pottery scene. But
okay, I can picture it in my mind's eye.
It's with a clay head. Yeah. Kind of like the weird clay head in that one Lionel Richie music video. Kind of like that. You heard that? Do you see that? It's terrifying. One person went, oh, at that. Me just saying that. Did not have that written in the notes. They also had a great voice acting cast in Fallout 1. But the highlight to me is Ron Perlman does narration, and he's the one that first says war never changes. That's pretty rad.
That's the line, right?
That's the big line. That's, I think, in every single Fallout game. I think. Pretty sure. Maybe not 2. 2's a little different. Yeah. I'm gonna talk about 2 because 2's kind of special. See what I did there? Okay. Story-wise, there was a contentious moment actually during development where they did have to change some stories because in the Junktown storyline, initially, if the player aided the local sheriff, Killian Darkwater, in killing the criminal Gizmo, Killian would take his pursuit of the law way too far and kind of become like a dictator of Junktown. Because you know how in the new Fallouts, there's no good ending to any decision you make. There's always a downside. They tried to do that in Fallout 1, it sounds like, and they were like, we have to change it so the ending is more palatable. You know, they're like, we're not ready yet. We're not ready for a super depressing ending. It's kind of funny when you think about it. So that was a publisher decision, by the way, not Interplay, but the publisher's like, you guys really gotta fix this so it doesn't get too much of a downer. And they're like, okay, well, you know what? It's going to get even more downers in Fallout 2. If you've never played a Fallout game before, by the way, I feel like we should mention this right now, because people right now are probably thinking Fallout first-person shooter, VATS, all that stuff. That is not at all in Fallout 1 and 2. Fallout 1 and 2 are top-down third-person games. They actually look a lot like XCOM. I've never played an XCOM game, though. I've watched video. Have you played an XCOM game, Tyler?
I've played some of the newer XCOM games, the ones that, because I mean, I know they were popular in like the late 80s, early 90s, I want to say. They were like tactical strategy games, same as they are now, but I've only played some of the newer ones.
Yeah, and I've watched some videos of the newer ones that I've never actually played. The game is a lot like XCOM. Tim Kaine even says, hey, we're really into XCOM at this time, so it's very big influence, and it shows. But the game uses an action point system, and you probably have heard of that system if you used VATS in Fallout 3 and 4 and New Vegas. But the action point system in this version would let you make a certain number of turns on actions on your turn. So like an attack would only be like 4 or 5 action points, while healing yourself would be like 3. I'm just making up numbers here. I have no idea what they actually were. So when you ran out of points, your turn was over. Okay. Also, you could have certain things happen to you that would affect how many action points you have. You know, like if you're poisoned.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, like essentially things like that. They also had different types of attacks. So if you had a melee weapon, you could like thrust with it or parry or stab, you know, or you could punch or kick if you're a melee character. So you can only equip at most 2 weapons at a time as a character, but you can switch between them at the click of a button. The perception attribute was what determined sequence number, kind of like your initiative order in D&D. So the higher your perception, the better you are at just going first, essentially. Okay. And in order the turn, because there's combat turns between each character in the game. So it's actually like a pretty cool system when you think about it. But my favorite thing, like one of my favorite facts about Fallout 1 is that we're kind of used to now, I think, making our own characters in RPGs. Yep. And in Fallout 1, you could still make your own character if you wanted to, but they also had 3 pre-made ones that you could choose from.
Oh, that's cool.
And they actually had like names and backstory. So I'm going to go over the 3 pre-made ones. Albert Cole is a negotiator and charismatic leader whose background is in the legal system. So it's like a high charisma character. Natalia Dubrovsky is a talented acrobat and intelligent and resourceful granddaughter of the Russian diplomat in Soviet consulate in Los Angeles. So you're like a more like quicker intelligence character, high dexterity, if you will. But it's not called dexterity because it's Fallout. Max Stone, the largest person in the vault, is known for his strength and stamina, but he lacks intelligence, a.k.a. he's a strong melee character. So
Makes sense.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That's neat, yeah.
I don't think a lot of like games now give you so much freedom that you don't really think about how fun it is to just play like a pre-made thing and go. I would kind of like a Fallout game that was like, yeah, you can make your own, but we also made these up for you if you just want to go quick in, you know?
It's also nice to show that like the character that you're playing in this game can have a backstory. Like it would even give me the idea of like, oh, if I want to make my own character, I should probably come up with a backstory for them, right?
Exactly. It's like old school role playing, you know? Which is not so old school because people still do it, but you know what I mean. It's fun. So Fallout ultimately took around 4 years to make. That's what Tim Kaine said. And the game was released on September 30th, 1997. Now, I don't want to spoil the plot of Fallout, the first Fallout. But just like a lot of Fallout games, not all, I wrote all in here, but that's not true because I learned later. It starts with a vault, and you're in a vault, Vault 13. And the overseer is like, hey, our water chip has gone bad. We don't have clean water. We need you to find it. Otherwise, we're all going to die. So you get 100 days to go get the vault clean water. And after that, hilarity ensues, I guess is how you could say it. But Fallout was a commercial success. According to Brian Fargo, that's again the co-founder of Interplay, sales of Fallout ultimately reached 600,000 copies. So they made up for it. You know, I believe their budget for Fallout 1 was $3 million. So they had to hit. I mean, unless they're selling them for $3 a pop, they probably made it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're probably doing okay.
Yeah, they did fine. Critically, the game was overwhelmingly positive. It had an 89 out of 100 on Metacritic. Computer Gaming World called it, quote, a game that clearly was a labor of love with humor, style, and brains to spare, and with a wonderfully refreshing emphasis on character development and decision-making, end quote. Wow. That's a great compliment. Thank you,
is.
Computer Gaming World. I wish you were still around. It can't be
Me
around
too.
anymore.
That was my favorite magazine.
Well, even more than Nintendo Power?
Maybe, yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. The Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences actually nominated Fallout for its Personal Computer Role-Playing Game of the Year and Outstanding Achievement in Sound and Music Awards, but it actually lost to Dungeon Keeper for the role-playing game and Parappa the Rapper.
Wow.
Yeah, it's always terrible to lose to Parappa the Rapper. But Fallout was ranked. It's ranked on a lot of lists. So it's ranked 4th in 2001, 10th in 2005, 13th in 2007, and 21st in 2008, and 7th in 2010. So I went back down on the best PC game of all time by PC Gamer lists. So it moves up and down on PC Gamer's list of best game of all time, but it's in the top 20 most of the time. Okay.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. One more thing I love about Fallout as a series, and I think you probably love about Fallout, and these are all in Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and New Vegas, are Easter eggs.
Oh, I love Easter eggs in all forms.
Yeah, and the best part is they started in Fallout, the first one. They had Easter eggs in the first Fallout. So they actually make references a lot to Mad Max and Radioactive Dreams. I don't know what Radioactive Dreams is. Do you know what that is?
Nope.
Cool. Well, we're going to move on. One of the first available armors in Fallout is a one-sleeved leather jacket that looks a lot like the Mad Max 2, the Road Warrior jacket worn by Mel Gibson. So they're just straight up talking about that. Yeah, also dog meat. The dog is essentially a Easter egg reference to Mad Max 2 as well. Fallout also has a lot of things referencing 1950s and 1960s pop culture. Many of these can be found randomly throughout the world. Those include a vanishing TARDIS from Doctor Who, and it has a sound effect that went with it, an enormous reptilian footprint, a crashed UFO containing a painting of Elvis Presley, and also the game makes a bunch of nods to like fiction things like War Games. Remember the movie War Games, and then Blade Runner. So yeah, it started it. I think from what I gathered, really, while this game is critically, according to Metacritic, better than Fallout 2, Fallout 2 really took this and ran with it, in an amazing way. So a couple things about Fallout 2. It's, again, same thing, post-nuclear role-playing game, the exact same top-down thing, the exact same, pretty much it's actually really similar with the mechanics and graphically. What happened was Black Isle Studios developed the game for Interplay this time. And what they did is they made the game world way bigger and they made the storyline way bigger. So there's just more story and more things to explore in Fallout 2 than Fallout 1. Yeah, it is great. And like I said before, when I said all the games start in a vault, Fallout 2 broke the mold. Okay, totally broke the mold. And in fact, Fallout New Vegas, you're a courier in the beginning.
Yeah, you don't start as in a vault in New Vegas either, I don't think.
That's right. So the game's story starts in 2241 in the primitive town of Arroyo. It suffers the worst drought on record, and it's faced with a calamity. Oh no, what are you going to do?
Oh no.
So the village elder actually makes you, who are the descendant of the vault dweller from the first game, and you're called the Chosen One, and you must perform the quest of retrieving a Garden of Eden creation kit, GECK for short. And GECK is a device that can create thriving communities out of a post-apocalyptic wasteland, And the player
sounds like what you would want to do in a game like this.
Totally. And you assume the role of the Chosen One, and you're giving nothing in the beginning except a Vault Dweller's jumpsuit, a Pip-Boy. You got to have a Pip-Boy. Vault 13 water flask, a spear, and then some cash. That's pretty cool, right? It's a pretty cool opening.
That sounds like a pretty good starting package.
I also like that you're the descendant of your character from the first game, because I think it happens 67 years later is how long it is between the two games, which I like. So yeah, no vault. Spoilers, though, you do end up going to Vault 13 in the second game, which is the vault from the first game, and you find it's inhabited by intelligent Deathclaws.
Oh, and Deathclaws are like the super hard bad guys, right?
Yeah, super scary bad guy. Super scary bad guy. So, I actually had a really hard time finding development information on Fallout 2, but I did end up finding an article on PCGamesN.com called How Fallout 2's Wild Wasteland Came to Define a Series. And this article is actually from 2017, so it's relatively recent. And they had some interviews with some people that worked on Fallout 2, and they're really great, really informative interviews. And so that's pretty much what the last part of this is, because that's really all I could find information on was this. The Wikipedia page for Fallout 2 is very sad, is what I'm trying to tell you. Yeah. The development has like one sentence about when Tim Kaine announced the game, and that was it. So the first thing I have is a quote from Fallout 2's producer, Eric DeMilt, and he says, quote, "We'd started working on Fallout 2 before we even shipped Fallout 1. That was in the middle of 1997. By the beginning of 1998, when Interplay was having some financial difficulties, they decided they wanted to make Fallout 2 and make it in the same amount of time as the original. And as far as they were concerned, we'd already been developing it for half a year already, so they basically gave us 9 months to make the whole game."
Dang.
Fallout 1, well, yeah, it's pretty crazy. He keeps going here. He goes, "Fallout 1 was amazing. It really knocked it out of the park, but Interplay launched it right before launching Baldur's Gate. And in terms of revenue, Baldur's Gate absolutely smoked Fallout." Okay, like Fallout initially sold something like 200,000 units, while Baldur's Gate sold like 1 million. And it was a much bigger game. So when we kicked off Fallout 2, there was the ambition to make it as big as Baldur's Gate. And that's kind of where a lot of the pressure came from when they were developing Fallout 2. Also, it's kind of nice to hear, because the only thing I could find about Fallout 1's commercial success was that it was like 600,000 copies total, but that pretty much was another little like fact I could find about Fallout 1 and their sales. So they didn't do as well as the company had hoped, because they were fighting with Baldur's Gate. So, okay. Yep, I have the exact same paragraph in there twice. That's right. You saw that correctly. So that 9-month release window is what really made it so Fallout 2 was so good. That rush they were in actually added a lot of stuff to Fallout 2 that made it what we love about it today. So in Fallout 2, you actually had a car, which is pretty cool. And your car, you could like put stuff in the trunk and you could store it. But there was like a weird bug with the car, and Dan Spitzley, who's one of the programmers, goes over it in that article. He says, quote, "Another idea was giving players this car where they could store items in the trunk. The way we implemented that was to basically categorize the trunk as a companion. The game would think of the trunk as a companion. But that meant sometimes the trunk would disconnect from the car and kind of walk around behind the player." You'd be on the 3rd floor of a vault or something, and the trunk would suddenly turn up next to you. It turned out to be a huge issue, end quote. And that's one of the more famous bugs from Fallout 2 that people liked, because it was just a funny bug, you know? Like, it's just like, oh, there's a trunk of my car walking around like a person. So, also because the artist team had to fill the open world with NPCs, they were given essentially free reign to create whatever they want. And this is Dan Spitzley again on being able to create stuff with the art team. He said, quote, "I basically sat down and thought up everything and anything I could fill these spaces with," because they had so much game world to fill. And it was just blank and empty. Spitzley says, "That's where a lot of the crazier stuff, like the treasure hunting dwarf or the rad scorpion that played chess, ended up coming from." Yeah, listening to them talk about this made me really want to play Fallout 2, because it seems like it's way zanier than the first Fallout, and I really liked it. Also, they had way more fun Easter eggs, too, because of that in Fallout 2. They just had like all sorts of stuff. I think I saw a picture, and I don't know if it's like an actual Easter egg or not, but someone had, like, you're in around a campfire, and all the sprites are just Star Wars characters sitting around a fire. And I'm like, this just looks like, even if it was a mod, it was so much fun. So Fallout 2, once again, critical and commercial success. It has an 86 out of 100 on Metacritic. And a lot of critics, like, if they did get mad at the game or like say the bad things about the game, it was all about the bugs. Like, there were a lot of bugs in the game. Bethesda kept that tradition going, actually, which is really nice of them. But IGN, yeah, that was the big thing they wanted to have, I'm sure, in the game. Yeah. IGN really liked it, and they liked the writing a lot. And they said if it had like kind of their whole review of Fallout 2 was essentially like, hey, you know, they saw this game wasn't broken, so why fix it? So they just made it even more of the good stuff, which is adding in more story and adding in more exploration while keeping the same features that everyone loved, like the combat system and special and all that stuff. So I think what really sums up Fallout 2 and the mindset of the developers while they were making Fallout 2 is this quote. It is, quote, "I remember being a meeting with Interplay's sales and marketing people and them kind of looking at what we had done for so far in Fallout and asking, well, what's new?" And they specifically wanted to improve the color palette, jump from 256 colors to 16-bit. But then Interplay co-founder Brian Fargo opened up and said, look, Fallout is awesome. We're making more Fallout. It's like a sequel to a movie. It's all about the story and the characters. End quote. So that's where I was like, Brian Fargo seems like a real stand-up guy. I think they kind of knew like the reason people play Fallout games is the story. And that's kind of why I play Fallout games and love them so much. Like finding the companions, like is it in the third Fallout where you find the super mutant with the big hammer that just kills everything for you?
Yeah.
It's my favorite. Or the dog, or getting a robot companion. They're all just great. Valentine from Fallout 4. He's one of my favorites. Like the noir detective, but he's a synth. It's great. That's why I love Fallout. So before we move on, because again, this is like a really quick one because there just wasn't a lot of stuff to research on Fallout 2. Whereas I feel like Fallout 1 had a lot of stuff to talk about. Fallout 2, a lot more of the same thing, which is good. And I feel like I'm not doing it justice, but they're two very good games. And also, and I don't work for Steam or anything here, okay? Just to let everyone know. But I was looking, obviously, when I researched the games to see how much they cost. And there's a sale going on for the next 40 hours as of recording this. So I think that if you check Steam the day this drops, it should still be up there. Where you can get like Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 for like $2.99 each.
Wow.
So
like $6 will get you the whole pack of 1, 2, and the Tactics Brotherhood of Steel game too.
Oh yeah, and we didn't talk about those because those are side games, and I just wanted to focus on Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, and these were also made by Interplay. I wanted to focus on the ones that were like these are the beginnings of Fallout. So so check that out if you're interested in that kind of thing. I'm obviously not a salesman, but check it out. You know, if you're like, oh my goodness, I wonder if I should get these games. They're $3. Get those games. Get on it.
Just do it.
Just do it. Before we move on to the other segments, like talking about next week and all that stuff, I did find one cool thing about Fallout 2 while perusing the internet, trying to get research stuff. And this actually popped up. There's a Polygon article called The Unexpected Challenges of Remaking Fallout 2 Using Fallout 4's Engine. So it's exactly what it sounds. It's called Project Arroyo, and it's a modding project with 50 people in it. Wow. And they are trying to remake all of Fallout 2 in Fallout 4 with first person and everything.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it started in September 2018, and there's a couple trailers on there of it, so you can see the progress they've made. But they're actually having a hard time. This is actually in the article. They say, quote, Project Arroyo has a unique challenge to contend with. Fallout 2's presentation and map design no longer hold up, especially through that new perspective. That new perspective being first person. So I think it's like they'll have to make some changes to make the game more visually interesting.
Yeah, give it some verticality and stuff like that. Hills.
Exactly. Otherwise, you're just running in one-story buildings the whole time.
Yeah.
So and that's cool. So I think actually I thought of that, including that, because maybe a cool idea one time for an episode would be the history of mod remakes. You know, because there's a lot of people like trying to recreate Morrowind and Skyrim and all sorts of stuff like that. So I think that'd be a really cool thing.
And there's a group, the Black Mesa Project, trying to recreate the first Half-Life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The problem is, do they ever succeed? That's what I want to know.
The Black Mesa Project is like they still have the last like chapter of Half-Life to do. But the most of the game is there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, also another thing we could talk about, and I really, this again is a speculating of different things we could talk about, but I remember watching a video, and it actually popped up on our gaming again recently, where this guy was making a game called Pokemon Generations, where it was like a third person, you're walking around a area and you'd catch Pokemon and you'd actually fight them by throwing the ball and actually like controlling the Pokemon and fighting. It looks really cool. And then Nintendo saw it and just shut it down immediately. So,
yeah. They tend to do that.
They're all about that, Nintendo. So maybe we got ideas and stuff. But before we start going off on a speculation tangent of what future podcasts are going to be. Tyler, what you been playing?
Oh boy, what I've been playing? More Destiny, obviously. Always playing Destiny. Yeah. This week actually has been pretty light on the old video games, though. Most of my free time is just going to Destiny. I played a little bit of Link's Awakening. I had two plane flights actually on Thursday, so I had a little bit of time to play a little bit, but I didn't play too much because I always have this thing where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to take my Switch and I'm going to play it on the airplane. And then I get on the airplane and I just get really tired and then I try to sleep. I never actually fall asleep, but I always try to. And so that's what I end up doing. It's
you
just
and I
sitting there with my eyes closed.
You and I fly in very similar ways.
Yeah.
I bring my DS all the time and then I'm just like, I feel so sleepy right now.
Yeah.
How
so
did we
I
get
haven't done too much gameplay in this week, but what about you? What have you been playing?
Oh man, I downloaded The Outer Worlds before it came out.
Oh, I have that downloaded. I'm getting ready to fire it up. Tell me about it.
It's so fun. It's like so a lot of my friends when Fallout 4 came out were just not used to Fallout and they're like, this is overwhelming. This is too much. Outer Worlds is that perfect streamlined RPG version where it's about talking to the characters. You have like obviously perks and leveling up and all that stuff, but there's not like building or any extra stuff into it. It's just,
I didn't like the building in Fallout 4.
Yeah, it was a lot. Also, the thing about Fallout 4 that drove me nuts was, and apparently they made a mod that would turn it off, but the constant like Minuteman quests and like it just was super annoying. So there was a lot of problems with Fallout 4. I still love the game and I got all the achievements and I loved every minute of it. But I think that Outer Worlds just took it and streamlined it in the perfect way to make it so like I'm noticing like I just went into an area and I either had to fight or pass a persuasion check. And I'm like, well, I can't do the persuasion check, so I'll fight. And I just got annihilated. And I'm like, you know what? Like my character is going to be long guns and like talking. Mm-hmm. That's all I want to do with my first character. Because the whole idea of it, this game's kind of short, so you can like re-roll new characters and try out different things.
Oh yeah, you can play it over and over.
Yeah. So, and when I say short, I mean I think it's like 40 hours, so it's still kind of long. You know, I love how that's a short game now. You know, versus the 150 hours or whatever I put into Red Dead Redemption. But I'm excited because I'm like, oh, I'll just not go in there and I'll go back and I'll like level up some other stuff. Like companions have quests, and you actually like. I at least really care about my companions, so I really want to go do stuff with them, and it's fun. But it's definitely a big rip on corporate America, and it's just really funny at times, and also really like dark humor at times, and gallows humor kind of stuff, and it is fantastic. And it shows right away in the first world you land on and you go to how like dark and depressing it is because it's like a corporate wasteland essentially. Big fan.
Man. Well, I'm very excited to check it out.
Yeah, you should check that out. I've been playing that. I picked up Batman. I played a little bit of Batman Arkham, but then Outer Worlds has come out, and I don't know when I'm going to go back to that. So
yeah. Well, Batman's 10 years old now. You give it a couple more weeks. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, right. And Destiny. Oh man, so much Destiny. And now the
always on the grind.
Always on the grind. And now the Festival of the Lost starts this week.
Oh yeah.
So got a lot to do. Got a lot of games. So many games to play.
Yeah.
So many games to play. We did, however, get 2 new ratings since our last week podcast. So thank you, anonymous people who rated us on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
We love you oh so much. Also, you can always email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. I do check that mail once every 2 or 3 days, usually. That's about what I do. You can also tweet at us. Tyler, what's your Twitter?
At SneakerElf, ELPH.
Ooh, that's right. And I am at Mecoletta, MECOLETTA. And you can tweet at us there. And we just want to hear from you. Tell your friends about the podcast, too. That means the world to us also. Do you tell your friends, Tyler, about your podcast?
Yes, I do. I told a friend about it yesterday.
Hey, I have this podcast.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, dope. And you're like, thank you. Thank you so much. Cool. Well, with that, I think next week's kind of a mystery, right? We're still kind of figuring out what next week's going to be.
Yep. Next week's still a mystery.
It's going to be a mystery. So until then, just play your favorite video game. You know what? I don't need to tell them. I've never told you guys what to do. This is the first week where I'm like, I don't have to justify our time, right?
No.
I already made that goof earlier with the other podcast, so I'm kind of scatterbrained right now. I just got back from camping, Tyler. I feel weird.
Yeah, well, you've been camping in a yurt, which is scientifically known to
Give
make
me
your brain bad.
Give me yurt fever.
Yeah,
I got
that's
yurt
it.
fever.
You get yurt fever.
It's totally it. But anyway, before we drone on and on, thank you so much for listening, and bye, everybody.
Goodbye.